The clock ticked loud in the dead quiet. Rain slicked empty streets outside. Inside, I sat sleepless, gripped by a knot of dread. Shadows deepened, the silence suffocating, every creak a threat. I tried to blame the whiskey, the exhaustion, but the feeling clung to me, a cold, unwelcome companion. My thoughts drifted to my child, a fragile light in the darkness, and the weight of fatherhood pressed down like lead. A floorboard creaked upstairs, slicing through the silence. The illusion of calm shattered. Dread coiled in my gut, no longer a whisper but a living thing. Only dying embers and weak moonlight lit the room, shadows writhing on the walls. My sanctuary felt like a trap, every doorway a threat, the house itself a silent witness. A cold draft carried the scent of decay and something metallic, almost like blood. My skin crawled. I scanned the corners but saw only shadows and silent furniture. Yet the feeling of being watched persisted, thick and oppressive. It wasn't just the house. Something else was here, unseen and malevolent. I was no longer alone in the darkness. Exhaustion gnawed at me, but sleep was a mirage. My mind conjured demons in the shadows, reality fraying at the edges. Memories of my baby's innocent face clashed with the suffocating dark. That love was an anchor and a raw wound, a vulnerability. I rose, needing to check on my child, to reassure myself this dread was just in my head, one last ritual before sleep. I took a deep breath, hoping for calm, unaware the storm had already arrived. The air turned colder, silence stretched to breaking. Then a baby's cry, sharp and terrified, not the usual fussing. My heart slammed. Was it real or my mind unraveling? The cry came again, louder, a wail of pure distress echoing through the house. Each sob clawed at me, a desperate plea that twisted my insides. I couldn't sit still. The urge to protect overwhelmed everything else. The baby monitor sat across the room, its screen dark. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move. I stumbled to the monitor, dread pressing on my chest. The screen flickered, revealing the nursery bathed in eerie light, my baby's crib, and something else, tall and gaunt, looming over my child. The figure was wrong, faceless, a blank expanse of skin. It rocked the crib in a sick parody of comfort, the baby's cries sharp in the audio. Terror and disbelief warred inside me. The creature's presence was undeniable. A guttural hum vibrated from the monitor, shaking me to my core. Frozen for a heartbeat, then rage shattered the ice. Adrenaline surged, instinct took over. I launched myself toward the nursery, the house fighting me with shadows and creaks. My heart hammered, the baby's cries guiding or luring me upstairs. The faceless thing's image burned in my mind, fueling my desperate flight. I reached the nursery door, chest heaving, hands slick with sweat. For a moment, fear whispered warnings, but my child's cry pushed me forward. I gripped the doorknob and threw the door open. I burst into the nursery, still, too still. The crib stood empty, a white island in darkness. My baby was gone. The air was cold, metallic, wrong. Frantic, I searched the room, under the crib, the closet. Nothing. The silence pressed in, echoing loss and abduction. The faceless thing's image seared my mind. It had been here and taken my child. Despair threatened to drown me, but rage surged up to meet it. My child was gone, and I would tear the world apart to find them. My eyes snagged on something out of place. On the crib's white mattress, a dark, irregular stain. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just a stain, it was writing. Scrawled, crude, vicious. Your blood for its laughter. Whose laughter? The creature's? Or my child's? This was a cruel game, and my child was the pawn. The hunt had truly begun. The bloody words on the crib sheet were a brand on my soul. Your blood for its laughter. What did it mean? How much blood? How would it even work? My mind, already reeling, struggled to process the monstrous demand. Did I have a choice? The thought of my child, alone with that faceless horror, spurred me on. There was no time for deliberation. No time for careful thought, only action, only a desperate, frantic need to find them, to end this waking nightmare. I spun away from the crib, from the crimson stain that mocked my helplessness. Lily! I screamed her name. My voice was a raw, broken thing. It echoed through the silent upper floor of the house, too loud, too desperate. Lily, where are you? Only the old house answered. A floorboard creaked downstairs, a loose window pane rattled in its frame. The silence that followed my shouts was heavier than before, deeper, more mocking. It swallowed my cries whole, leaving nothing but the sound of my own ragged breathing. I stumbled out of the nursery back into the dim hallway. Each closed door was a fresh wave of terror. Behind which one was my child? Behind which one did that faceless thing lurk, waiting? The hallway seemed longer now, darker. The shadows danced with a malevolent glee. The air was thick with an unseen presence. I could feel it. Eyes on my back, a cold breath on my neck. This house, my home, had become a hunting ground, and I was the prey, or perhaps the hunter, lured into a deadly unseen trap. Where to start? The options were a paralyzing weight. Every room a potential prison, every corner a possible ambush. The sheer size of the old house, once a comfort, now felt like a curse. I took a breath, trying to fight down the rising panic. I had to be methodical, but logic had fled, replaced by a primal, animalistic urgency. I picked a door, the closest one. My hand, slick with sweat, reached for the knob. Another descent into the unknown, another step into the creature's game. As my fingers brushed the doorknob, I heard it. A whimper. My baby's whimper. It seemed to come from downstairs. Hope cut through my fear. She was alive, close. I bolted towards the stairs. I burst into the living room. The room was empty, silent. Had I imagined it? Then I heard it again, further away, deeper in the house. The creature was leading me, toying with me, using my child's distress as a cruel leash. I had no choice. I had to follow. The house breathed around me. Every hallway was a windpipe, every door a clenched jaw. I pressed onward, the baby's cries now a distant echo. My knuckles whitened around the handle of the old baseball bat I'd grabbed from behind the coat rack. It felt useless, a child's toy against a monster. I stopped outside the guest room. My hand hovered over the knob, trembling. The silence here was brutal, thick and oily. I forced myself to move, to act, because standing still meant surrender. The door groaned as I pushed it open. The room reeked of rot and iron. My eyes adjusted. I saw smears of blood on the faded wallpaper, trailing in thick, jagged lines like the desperate claw marks of a dying animal. The lamp on the side table flickered, casting shadows that twisted the carnage into something even more grotesque. In the center of the room, on the once white bedspread, was another note. Written in blood, the letters warped with agony. A finger for a whisper, a tongue for a name. The words crawled off the bedding, alive with malice. I stared at the message, my mind racing, my stomach threatening to revolt. The mattress was soaked through in spots, the blood pooling on the floor beneath. I could almost see the ghost of the violence, the frantic struggle, the creature's cold efficiency. The note was a demand, a promise, and a threat all at once. I didn't know whose finger, whose tongue, whose suffering had purchased these words. Maybe the creature was mocking me. Maybe it was reminding me. Every room in this house had a price. Every step cost blood. I forced myself to move closer, the bat raised. I expected the creature to lunge from the shadows, faceless and silent, but the room was empty except for the echo of agony and the stench of death. I picked up the note. The blood was tacky, still fresh. The baby's cries drifted from somewhere deeper in the house, closer now, sharper. The game wasn't over, the demands were escalating, and I was already running out of things to give. I staggered into the hallway, my head spinning. My daughter's whimper curled around the corners, leading me to the study. The door was ajar, swinging slightly as if beckoning me inside. I hesitated, the bat held tight, but the sound of her cries, the way they were muffled, strangled, dragged me forward. I pushed inside and the stench hit me like a punch. Copper, decay, old, wet paper. The walls were lined with books, but tonight every story was written in blood. On my old desk, among scattered bills and broken pens, there was another note. This one was pressed flat beneath a butcher knife, its blade stained. The message, a memory for a heartbeat. Give, and you may see. The letters swam before my eyes, thick and clotted. Beside the note, a family photo had been slashed to ribbons, the faces torn away. I ran my free hand through my hair, heart hammering. Was this a warning, an offer, a threat? I felt my mind fraying, threads snapping one by one. There was more. Blood spattered across the bookshelf, trickling down spines of old novels. I followed the trail to the corner where something glistened on the floor, a child's pacifier caked in red. I dropped to my knees, hands shaking. It was Lily's. The blood was still warm. I wanted to scream, to tear the room apart, but all I could do was stare at the knife and the note and the remnants of the life I was losing piece by piece. The study was a shrine to suffering now, my suffering. I tried to focus on my breathing, on the sound of my daughter's voice, closer, closer. The creature was baiting me, testing how much pain I could take before I broke. It wanted more. A memory for a heartbeat. What did that mean? What would I have to give up next? The house seemed to close in, the shadows pressing tighter, but I had no choice. I staggered upright. Lily's cry, thin but defiant, called from the kitchen. I wiped the tears from my eyes and pressed on, every step an act of war. The kitchen light buzzed overhead, harsh and cold. Shadows clung to the edges. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, half expecting a monster to leap at me. Instead, the room was empty, except for the violence it held. Blood painted the white tile in wild arcs, pooling in the grout, splattered across the fridge and cabinets. My legs threatened to buckle. The metallic tang in the air was overwhelming, cloying, suffocating. There was another note pinned to the butcher block with a rusted fork. The words were barely legible, scrawled in thick, clotted blood. Your voice for its silence, suffer and the crying will end. Next to the note was a child's toy. A rattle, cracked and sticky, its handle smeared red. I reached out to touch it and my hand came away slick. The implications were clear. The creature was demanding more, not just blood, not just pain. It wanted my voice, my hope, my soul chipped away inch by inch. I glanced around the room. The baby's cries were everywhere and nowhere, echoing through the vents, bouncing off the tile. I couldn't tell where she really was anymore. The psychological torment was worse than the blood. It felt like the house itself was bleeding, weeping for me, for my child. I slammed my fist against the counter, frustration boiling over. Come out, take me, leave her alone. My words died in the empty air. Only the crying and the drip of blood from the counter answered. Suddenly the crying stopped. The silence was absolute, deafening. It pressed in against my ears, cold and cruel. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the creature's demands, my heart hammering against my ribs. There was only one room left I hadn't checked, the basement. The shadows there were always the deepest. I grabbed the knife from the block, smeared with old blood, and forced myself toward the basement door. Each step was a descent into hell. The basement door loomed at the end of the hall. It was old, warped and swollen with age, the paint peeling in strips. A new note was nailed to the center of the door. The blood was still wet, dripping onto the floor, forming a small pool that threatened to seep under the threshold. I ripped the note free, my hands shaking. This one was different. The message was short, final. Your soul for hers, the choice is yours. Below it, a knife gleamed in the darkness, its blade wickedly sharp, waiting. I stared at the knife. My reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, unrecognizable, stared back. The air in the hallway was freezing, every breath a struggle. I could hear the baby's cries, muffled now as if coming from the other side of the earth. The creature's demands had escalated. No more games, no more riddles. It wanted everything. My life for hers, my soul for her freedom. My knees buckled. I collapsed against the door, the knife cold and heavy in my palm. Was this the end? Was this how it had to be? I thought about Lily, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, her laugh bright and pure, cutting through even the darkest days. The weight of fatherhood pressed down harder than ever. Was I willing to pay the final price? Would I damn myself to save her? The faceless creature's game had led me here, to this final, impossible choice. The blood in the kitchen, the suffering in the study, the carnage in every room, all of it had been a prelude to this moment, this terrible bargain. I closed my eyes, the knife trembling in my hand. The house was silent now, waiting, watching. The creature was near. I could feel it. The world narrowed to a single point. The blade, the blood, the offer. My soul for hers, the ultimate price. And as I reached for the handle, I knew the next step would change everything. The shadows pressed closer, hungry, eager. The final threshold was before me. I took one breath and then another and prepared to make my choice. The silence was a vice, crushing me, my soul for hers. The words from the note echoed. They hammered against the inside of my skull. My mind reeled under this impossible ultimatum. How could a father be asked to make it? The darkness seemed to press in, suffocating me. Memories of Lily, bright and warm, flashed before my eyes. These images, once a comfort, were now instruments of torture. The creature knew how to break me. It was after the very essence of what made me human, what made me a father. Despair washed over me, a black, oily tide. My own reflection in the blade was a stranger, a ghost. From a terror so profound it threatened to unravel me completely. The weight of it all was unbearable. The shadows writhed, taking on shapes, whispering from the corners of my vision. I squeezed my eyes shut, but the voices grew louder, tangling with my thoughts. I saw Lily gurgling happily, then the image flickered, her smile melting into a silent scream. The creature was poisoning everything. Blood seemed to ooze from the walls. The house was alive, a malevolent entity judging me. A floorboard creaked upstairs. I couldn't trust my senses. I was trapped in a nightmare, and the walls of my sanity crumbled, leaving me utterly alone. My fingers trembled around the knife. The demand for my soul was a sentence, an eternity devoid of light, of love, of Lily. The whispers returned, a chorus of unseen tormentors. The creature was dismantling my life, piece by agonizing piece. I was just a man, a terrified father, pushed far beyond any sane limit. I was at the edge, the very edge of myself. The knife felt heavier than the world. The note burned, your soul for hers. Nailed to the basement door, a final demand. The air hung heavy. This was it. The creature had laid its cards on the table. My soul, the price for my daughter's life. The knife gleamed in the darkness, an invitation to sacrifice. Lily, her innocent face, her laughter, what would become of her even if I paid? Silence from behind the basement door. I picked up the knife. My decision, my burden. A plunge into an abyss. My gaze fixed on the basement door. Love for my child battled against dread. I made my choice. I raised the knife and turned the knob.